Hi, I'm Wolfie Rugel. I work for the Butte County Resource Conservation District, and I want to tell you all about why I love blue oak woodlands. Blue oak woodlands, like where we're standing right now, are, to me, an iconic California forest landscape. Way more than the redwoods. They cover way more of California. They only live in California, and they live in a special ring all around the Central Valley, from Redding all the way down to Bakersfield. Right now I'm standing here in Chico. And blue oaks are adapted to some of the harshest conditions of any woodland, really anywhere in the world. Here in California, where the blue oaks grow, they're specialized to grow in conditions where the daytime temperatures are regularly over 100 degrees. The nighttime temperatures don't get much cooler, and blue oak woodlands can thrive in places that get 20, 15, 12 inches of rain a year. They're really the only woodland that can exist in conditions like those. Another thing that blue oaks do is, because they're the only really deep-rooted tree that can exist in the harsh conditions that they specialize in, they've got roots that can go many, many, many feet deep into the deep soil and pull up some of the nutrients that have been leaching down from the subsoil into the deep soil. So like there's calcium down there and potassium that keeps leaching down, and the oaks keep pulling it up. And they pull it up through their bodies and out into their leaves and their twigs. And every fall, this wonderful nourishing cascade of leaves and some twigs and some bark and maybe a limb here and there falls down to earth and nourishes this topsoil skin of the earth. And that nutrient cycling is only enhanced by fire. Blue oaks are actually one of the most fire-resistant trees in California. It's true, this bark is actually pretty thick. And this kind of blue oak woodland or savanna where we're standing now would historically have burned at least once every 10 years, maybe every 7 or 5 years, or if this was a place where native folks were living and they really wanted to ensure an optimal acorn crop, they might even have burned under these oaks every single year. And the oaks are fine with that. They keep thriving. They're usually not even top killed, but if the oak above ground does happen to die because the fire gets a little bit too hot, they'll just resprout from the base and keep growing. Also, sometimes when you look inside a blue oak, even in the very dead of summer, even after 4 or 5 months of summer, there'll be water in there in those cavities. I don't know if that's rainwater that just stays there since spring, or if the blue oak is pulling up deep water from the deep soil and holding it inside its body, but you'll find tree frogs over summering inside blue oaks. You'll find ants and all kinds of birds dipping in to take a drink of water and fly away or disperse away to do their work. So they're very important for all of the creatures that we like to see around us. Blue oak woodlands support thousands of species of animals, mammals and birds, invertebrates, fungi, and all the different companion grasses and wildflowers that grow around the blue oaks, many of which grow no place else on Earth. Blue oaks do a number of very special things to help all of these neighbors thrive as a community. Of course, blue oaks produce acorns. An acre of blue oak woodland can easily produce 2 tons of acorns in a good year, and that's about 7 million calories, about a third of which is fat. So that is an incredible source of nutrition. It's really important for the deer, the bear, many kinds of birds, and just an unspeakable diversity of invertebrates that get into that acorn and consume those fats and carbohydrates, and then of course become the basis of the whole rest of the food chain.
So blue oak is known to have this very creamy and yummy good taste to it. They taste really good, so they were preferred. My name is Allie Metters Knight. I am a tribal member of the Mechoopda Indian tribe here in Chico, California. I also call this occupied Mechoopda territory. So what we have here, I'm talking about blue oaks, but blue oaks isn't the name. We're going to call it by its real name, which is cha-kah-wee. We need to understand that this blue oak doesn't grow anywhere else in the world but here, and we are the caretakers. And so if you're living in California, if you are in the Sierra foothills and you live around this area, this is your responsibility. You're the only place on earth where this tree exists. So why would you not have knowledge and know how to take care of it? You are in that place. It is an innate part of nature that you pay attention to your environment before your environment gets to you. So to survive fire country, you're going to need to know one of the first and most very, very important keystone species, which is cha-kah-wee. Cha-kah-wee. These trees were always used to make homes. They were usually split in the middle. These are kind of huge bonsai trees to the local natives. They were able to be crafted and made to whatever was necessary. And we have lost that craft of paying attention to these oaks in such detail, but that doesn't have to be lost forever. We can wake up. The second thing about cha-kah-wee, which is really, really important to know, is that this is drought-resistant plant. It's got a huge taproot that goes down. So when times are tough and you don't have a lot of water and you need to put a tree on a landscape, cha-kah-wee is your dude. So blue oaks in the Sierra foothills is a vital part of being able to control and understand fire. You use not only deer trails for fire breaks, but you also use your ecosystem. So as you leave your riparian and you're going up a higher elevation, you should be seeing your blue oaks come in. Your blue oaks are not only your defensible space because they burn harder, they burn slower, but these blue oaks also grow slower. So you're not going to have hyper growth that comes through there. So because it takes its time to grow, it also has defensible space within its bark for fire. It's made for fire throughout its own development as a tree. So cha-kah-wee is a fire adapted plant. But cha-kah-wee does not do well with super hot fires. Cha-kah-wee does well with nice cool burns. So when you have a nice cool burn under cha-kah-wee, it goes and gets the weevils and all of the other bugs out of the acorns, which are really healthy. But it also maintains and clears out what it is. These deep tap roots do great for these foothills, especially during times of floods. So it also holds up the integrity of the landscape as well as the soil itself. So it's important. That's why I'm working with the tribe to design and to do outreach for communities, not only tribal communities, but non-tribal communities and property owners, to have the right type of information about the native plants on their property and in their community and in their ecosystem and how to keep that restored and maintained. If we don't have knowledge about what plants in our property are native, how they're taken care of, and what they look like when they're sick and what they look like when they're healthy, if we don't have that information, we cannot have a safe home. We can't have a safe community. When you do have woodlands that come up close to where homes are, you should have an intense amount of maintenance and knowledge about how that land is made because of the risks of the community that's on the other side of that woodland. I just want to thank everyone for listening to me and support cha-kah-wee and your local ecosystem. Thank you.
This tree is probably the best one I've seen yet. It's covered in acorns that are still green. You want the green ones. The green ones will be perfect, and you want to take the cap off if you're going to plant them. Sometimes I wonder, every tree we might think that they're just planted by happenstance, just random nature a long time ago, but it's very possible that someone very intentionally planted this tree and there's a whole story behind that. I think there's just a lot more intention behind and stories behind, trees than we usually think when we walk past them. So this is the blue oak woodland. There's a lot of cow pasture though. You can see there's big areas that have no trees. That if that's the case, there might be cattle coming through and grazing, or if you have deer, because that's probably the reason why there isn't more trees in an area like this, is cattle are eating the smaller ones. And in other areas, like up in Paradise and Berry Creek, there might be deer coming that'll eat your plant if there's no fence or if there's nothing protecting it until it gets a little bit bigger. This is a blue oak. A lot of people are going to be getting these more in a form that looks maybe bare root, and it might look a little bit rounder than this. But so when you plant one, you want to make sure that you are, a good ways away from other trees, but maybe in the afternoon shade, like we are, of these, so that once it gets hot and that, next summer, this new one will be a little bit shaded, but it's not so close that it's going to be right underneath. You want to give them a little bit of space. One way that you can find if you have an area that's not just going to be rock is if you look around, you find evidence of gopher digging. You can see there's real soil. And so first thing you want to do is clear some of this stuff out of the way. Dead plant stuff. What you want is to dig the hole deep enough so that this level, and if you get it bare root, you might have to just sort of look and see where it's been, you can tell where it's been underground, and you want it to be planted about the exact same level. One of the most important things about native plants is not to break up this root ball, which some people might think is standard, but it's not. You'll do more harm than good if you rip this up. Now, so you can see that it's just about exactly the same. Maybe, yeah. And then gently fill it back in without packing. Just make sure that it fills in all the way around. If your dirt won't crumble, you might have to go find some more crumbly dirt, or you might have to fill it in with potting soil so that it doesn't, so there's no air pockets that drying the roots out. But that's sort of why I picked this spot, is because there's all this soil right here. Other things you could do if you have the ability is you could wet down the area the night before. Not right before, because then you might mix up a bunch of clay and it'll turn into cement sort of. But the day before, so that the soil is more workable. You can see how I still have the original top of the potting soil is still exposed. I don't want to cover that up with this different soil. But that's about it. Now you can take extra soil that you have and make a little a berm around it for the most important part, which we're about to do. And then you could also take material that you scraped away at first and put it over this soil so you don't have bare soil exposed. And so when I do the next part and water it, it doesn't mix it up too aggressively and cause drainage problems. Free mulch everywhere. Most important part, so I didn't pack it and I didn't break up the root ball, and I made sure it was level. The main thing that really is planting it is the watering. You want to make sure that you water it right after you plant it if you can. Don't let it sit in a dry hole like this. Because the main thing about this is you want to give it a really good soak so that the water goes in between all the soil particles, and as it goes down through, it'll pull those soil particles back together with water droplets in between. It'll create a little network. It'll wash soil particles into little air pockets that might dry out the roots and cause damage. So I watered it once. So a bunch of that water probably found one path of least resistance, and so it's probably dry on one side and wet on the other, but it's all seeping around in there. And so it went down a little bit. I'm just going to fill up that berm again, let it settle again. Planting in the fall, it probably won't need much water. I mean, it should rain eventually, but it'll defoliate and go dormant, and hopefully won't really need to have too much water until next spring. The first summer, you're probably going to have to water it a little bit more, but it's going to be different in every spot. So instead of there's no general rule. You're going to want to go out and check on it, like scratch down in there and see if it's wet, because it might look totally dry in between watering, but it might actually be wet underneath. And so if you keep watering it too much without actually checking, it could be sitting in a little pool of warm water in the summer underground, and that'll rot them. So they're very adapted to drought, and they're not adapted to sitting in warm, like soggy, warm soil. So letting them dry out a little bit in between watering in the summer is pretty important. It won't be long before they're pretty established on their own. It could take up to 3 years for them to be totally established, but and the blue oak is probably the most drought adapted one. They just grow slow if they have no care at all. That's why they're blue. They cover themselves up with this wax that's blue. They can't respirate. They can't take in as much CO2 and stuff when they do that, and they can't let go as much water to pull up water, so they grow really slow in the summer. So giving them extra care and water and attention in the spring and fall before they do that can help them grow a lot faster, if that's what you're after. But if you find acorns, you could plant a lot more of them a lot easier without all the digging. Just choose the same site kind of selection, not too much farther away from the blue oaks that you found them from is usually a good idea. And then you just want to keep in mind that the root will come out of the point of this and it'll go straight down first. No leaves will come up until much later. So you don't want to, you want to plant an acorn so that it's just underneath the soil, just enough so almost like a piece of it is poking up out of the ground, but not quite. But you don't want to plant it with the point pointing upwards, because then it'll be really awkward when a root comes out of that and tries to grow downwards after the fact. But this is too close to this tree, so I would plant this at least 10 or 15 feet away from another blue oak. But that's it. That's just about everything you need to know.
These are all maps of California, and on each map the green is the existing range of blue oaks and where we think the blue oaks will still continue to be in the future. They'll be fine. If you look at these maps, you'll also see some red, and that red is where, if the climate changes enough, blue oak could lose some of its habitat. Scientists think that in some places the climate could actually become so hot and so dry that blue oaks can't survive anymore. But you'll also see blue on these maps, and that blue is where blue oaks could be gaining new habitat. So if you live around 1,800, 2,000, even 3,000 feet, You could see your forest that currently is probably a lot of ponderosa pine and black oak mixed with incense cedar and other madrone and other hardwoods. Over time, it's possible it could become hotter and drier and become more like blue oak habitat. And we're not talking about changes hundreds of years from now. We're talking about changes that definitely could occur within the lifetime of someone alive today. So if you're out on your land planting trees and you live in the Sierra foothills, go ahead and plant some black oaks and some ponderosa pine and some incense cedar, but make sure you plant some blue oaks too, just in case. And maybe in your kid's lifetime or your grandkid's lifetime or their kid's lifetime, they could be living in a mixed blue oak woodland, and they'll thank you for planting some blue oaks.